The Choctaw people are a Native American tribe who formed in the southeast portion of the United States. Their rich history stems back up to 8,000 years ago. They are best known for their post-colonial adoption of written language, farming methods, and having European American and African American lifestyles enforced into their society. The first creation myth of the Choctaw people consists of a great mound in the earth known as the Mother Mound. It was from this mound that the Creator fashioned the first of the people. These people crawled through a long dark cave into the daylight, where their sun deity dried them, and they became the first Choctaw people. The second creation myth consists of the Choctaw tribe descending from the continent Lamora, which is believed to have been washed away by the Pacific Ocean. It is said that a tribe emerged from the ocean where they were dried by their deity, the sun. They then moved east. The journey to the new homeland was long and treacherous. Two brothers led the original people while being guided by a supernatural staff. Each night, when the people stopped to camp, the staff was placed into the ground, and in the morning the people would travel in the direction that the staff had leaned, until one morning the people awoke to find the staff standing straight, signifying that the Choctaw people had found their new homeland. The Choctaw tribe believed in a religion that consisted around a great good spirit and a great evil spirit. They also believed in numerous deities who were all connected to nature within their characteristics. The Choctaw tribe associates the sun as their creator, as the tribe believes the sun has the ability to create life and take it. The tribe also views the sun as their protector. As long as the sun was touching them, no evil could inflict any harm. The tribe also found it customary to perform any tribal ceremonies or meetings with other tribes to discuss conflict resolution only when the sun was out. The sun ritual consisted of when a member of the tribe would pass away, the body was placed on a platform in a nearby forest and allowed to decompose naturally. The body was left outside in the elements for over a year or more, allowing the family and the community access and the ability to mourn properly. During this time also, the Choctaw believed the spirit of the deceased was returning to the supreme power of the sun, which held ultimate power of life and death. The sun would decide if they were granted access to the happy hunting ground or to a dead, barren land full of thorned plants that inflicted severe injuries and pain that would never cease to end. The Choctaw tribe practices a unique double burial. The Choctaw allow the body of the deceased to decompose naturally on an outdoor platform, set away from the home. The family would then hold a ceremony where a distinguished member of the tribe, known as a bone picker, would sort through the remains to gather all of the bones. The bones would then be buried in a mass grave with other tribe members. When the graves became full, it would resemble the Mother Mound. These places remained as sacred areas as family members and other tribal members would come here to visit the deceased and pay their respects. Today, the Choctaw have three federally recognized tribes. The largest is the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. Next is the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians. And third is the Jenna Band of Choctaw Indians located in Louisiana. Today, most Choctaw people believe in some form of Christianity. This is most likely due to the tribe's integration into European American culture. My interviewee is Eric. He did not grow up in a traditional single religion household. His mother, father, and grandparents all had their own religious beliefs. It was not until later in life, when he connected with distant relatives who taught him about his Choctaw roots, that he began to practice the traditional religious beliefs of his Choctaw ancestors. So first, thank you for agreeing to do this again.
Absolutely, anytime.
All right. So the first question that I have for you is, what is your religious affiliation?
I don't really have as opposed as with I don't have one per se with the definition of the word religion or religious. I have a spiritual belief system that doesn't fall under any kind of organized religion that is out there. So
So what would that belief system, how would you identify that or how would you label it?
I've found it very difficult to put a label on it, to be honest with you. I haven't really found one yet, other than following the ways of my ancestors. It's about as good as I can get. And then that kind of, that leads me to what set of beliefs that is, which I identify the most with the Choctaw, but
So what role did religion play for you in your upbringing?
it was extremely complicated. Um, my mother was Catholic, my father was Lutheran, and my grandparents kind of started out in my childhood as Catholic, but then like switched over to the Episcopalian religion. Um, and so I had those three conflicting because all three conflict with each other in one way or the other. Um, I had those conflicting things and they all had holes in them. So I kind of just went along to get along. Obviously, they were my parents and my grandparents, so I kind of had to. Um, in my alone time, though, that's where I spent exploring my own beliefs. Like, what did I believe? And I always believed that there was something greater than myself. I just didn't know what it was. Um, so that it I went to church a lot. I went to Sunday school. My parents put me in a Christian daycare. When I was younger, so that influence was always there. The foundation was always there. Um, I just couldn't ever really grasp onto it internally, because for me, it just never felt right.
Was it about the other, like, mainstream religions, like the Catholic, Lutheran? What was it that you didn't like or agree with?
I was hearing one thing but seeing another. So inherently, before before I became jaded by life, as a child, it was like, okay, I'm hearing this every Sunday or on Wednesday or both, but for the rest of the days, this is what I'm seeing. These are the actions that I'm. So the words never lined up with the actions, and it wasn't just so much like my own family. It was like people that that I saw from the church. That my family went to. Even up to and including clergy members. So it just, for me as a child growing up and seeing that, it's like, okay, I hear you, what you're saying, but I don't see you living it. So, if it doesn't work for you, then how's it going to work for me? And that kind of led to the whole snowball effect, if you will, of just nothing ever real feeling right. I never felt accepted or anything like that. So
What has your, so we've kind of already covered this, but I want to see if you have anything else to add. But what has your experience been with practicing your religious beliefs with people of other beliefs?
uh, it's been challenging. Um, I've faced a lot of ridicule. Um, I've I've been verbally abused for it. Um, and it's something that I hold very deep within. And so facing that ridicule and, basically telling me that what me and my ancestors believed is wrong, and that, this is the only way to go, or that's the only way to go. And, basically having my entire belief system picked apart and dismantled and made fun of and ridiculed in every way. It's been challenging, very challenging. For the longest time, I kind of hid, because it got pretty nasty. So I kind of hid that and, did it, in private, basically. Um, but as I grew older, I kind of, as I started to dig deeper in researching more and everything else, um, along with some other personal experiences, I just got to the point where I knew that I was going to face that ridicule regardless. Um, and, and so it doesn't really matter if I do it in private or if I do it out in public. So, I mean, to this day, I still face, ridicule. I get the looks, I get the snickers and the comments and everything else, but it is what it is because people don't understand it, and I get that.
How do your like mom and dad and grandparents feel? Did they not know? Did they not know? Is it just something that you've kind of kept more private that you didn't choose to take one of their religious pathways?
Um, well, they that so to answer that one, I guess the practicing on my own and not really clinging to their religious beliefs, if you will, um, led me to being a little bit rebellious when they would bring it up. And so it kind of caused a riff, but at the same time, it's like, oh, it's just Eric being Eric. It's just kids being kids, type stuff. And so, we kind of went with it, they kind of went with that aspect of it. But as I grew older and started digging into it, my mother was very accepting of it. Um, she also has, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Revamped, if you will, her religious beliefs over time with her own personal experiences, to where now she subscribes more to the Buddhist religion than anything else. Um, my my dad bucks it a lot, um, but I get where that comes from. Um, my grandmother, she's all right with it. As far as I know, anyway, I haven't spoken to my grandmother in a while, but the last time she and I had a discussion about it, she was cool with it because it lines up a lot with that side of my family and where they come from, and the association between the Choctaw tribe and that part of my ancestry as well. So they're very, very similar. So she understands where I'm coming from and she gets it. Sadly, my grandfather passed away in 2008, so he didn't really have a chance to discuss any of that with me. We never really had that discussion. So, as far as that goes, I really couldn't tell you, but overall, they're pretty accepting of it. But
Mhm. So, what would you say, in your opinion, what is the purpose of religion?
to be completely frank and honest, crowd control. I mean, so there was a part in a period in my life, where I was deep, deep, deep into the research and discussion of the Abrahamic religions, two in specific. Um, I guess what you could call modern Christianity outside of the Catholic Church, as well as the beliefs of the ancient Hebrews, and because that's the root of that religion.
Mhm.
So learning all of those things and digging as deep as I have into those things, I, I found out that a lot of those beliefs came from other cultures and other places, and that those cultures and places and those peoples, they already had their own set of beliefs, and they kind of picked a little bit from here and there and put it all together.
That was something I learned in this class, even the similarities between all of the religions and the religious figures and the prophets, and how they all kind of follow the same track and the same version of the story, but the details are just changed
Sure,
a little bit.
they are.
I'm kind of torn between, I don't know if religion serves as the answer and like this fulfillingness that we search for as human beings, or if I view it more as a sense of social control and social construct
Absolutely.
and aligning strict beliefs onto mass amounts of people. And it's one of the only ways to like actually control that many people in that manner. So I don't know, I feel like it serves multiple purposes. It just depends on what your outcome is for everything, what your end goal is.
Sure. And that was one of the biggest contentions between me and my family when we spoke about my religious or my spiritual beliefs versus their religion. Was that their religion, and it didn't matter. Like even when I branched out on my own and I was doing my research into all the Abrahamic religions and everything else, is that in the Abrahamic religions, it's all about seeking something outside of yourself, looking to another
Mhm.
figure to save you. Whereas following the beliefs of my ancestors, everything you need to save yourself is already in here.
Mhm.
It's just a matter of finding. So that was one of the biggest sources of contention between me and my family when it came to it.
It's understandable. All right, so we're going to go over a couple topics and we're going to discuss what your religious beliefs and perspectives are based on the Choctaw um, religion and culture and traditions. So the first topic is going to be gender. How does gender play out in that religion, in that culture, in that everyday life?
So, as far as I know, and this was up to about 2, 3 years ago, where I was in contact with, elder members of the Choctaw tribe on a consistent basis in Oklahoma. As far as I know, it's still the theme still runs the same. Um, but women are held in very high regard, and as well they should be. And as far as like the gender roles, they're seen as the roles are seen as similar. So it's like equal sides pulling weight. There isn't one that has more than the other. Women are seen as, the source of life, which that would take 3 weeks to, play that discussion out. But, so therefore women, they're held in very high regard, but it's like, it's not necessarily worshiping, but it is definitely a form and a sign of reverence, because of how, the role that women play in creation and in life. So it was an everyday thing, a part of life, where the roles were split evenly. The man would go out, do his thing, the woman would be doing her thing, go out and do her thing. It wasn't how modern society thinks it really is. So genders weren't, one wasn't seen as higher than the other in the home or in the society. They were seen as equal. But as far as like, I hate to put this label on it, but as far as importance, women were held in higher regard than men, which, that's just kind of the way it was.
Hmm. Was there any special like situations that you know of in traditional, like when they got married? Was like, did they move in with the wife's family? Did they move in with the husband's family? Like, what was their tradition after marriage?
So the tradition after marriage was that the man took the woman's, joined the woman's family. So the
Okay.
husband joined the wife's family. And that, that just, that I guess I would say that falls in line with, holding women in such high regard, whereas obviously in modern society, over the last couple thousand years or so, that's been kind of flipped around. But that's how they observed it. The male always joined the female family.
Okay. So, with the topic of gender, it also brings the next topic of sexual orientation.
Mhm.
How does the Choctaw people take to the concept of like homosexuality and non-traditional gender identity?
Speaking from experience and what I know and the discussions that I've had, it's not as looked down upon as people think it is. Um, it it's seen as not necessarily something foreign or something where people need to get extricated or removed from their group, the tribe, or anything like that. They're I wouldn't necessarily say that they're like completely and totally accepting of it, but
So is it safe to say that the Choctaw people don't believe in like the third, how would I put it, like a third gender? Like some Native Americans believe that you would be two-spirited if
yes,
you were okay.
yes. And a lot
So
of
is
those
that
two
more
spirited people become shamans and things like that. So and shamans and medicine people and things, they're also held in very
so is that more of a traditional aspect, or is that still seen as a modern concept that
high.
people are still veered as two-spirited and they're still held to a higher regard?
um, in the more what's the word I'm looking for? Orthodox, if you will, to use a familiar term, I'd say yes. Um, the sad thing that really kind of hits home for me is how non-traditional the Choctaw tribe has truly become in recent times. Um, and it really saddens me. It breaks my heart actually, but it kind of is what it is. There still is your Orthodox, you know, tribal members that adhere to those things. So in those circles, if you will, those two spirited people are still very much held in high
What about this concept of salvation? What does that look like?
regard. The ancient Choctaw, which is more of what I subscribe to, they believe that in order to save yourself, it would be internal. Whereas a lot, so one of the major deities of the Choctaw is the sun. the giver of life, things like that. So they didn't necessarily have a singular belief in salvation, so to speak. Um, so it wasn't that, some person or some deity was going to save you from anything, um, but that salvation came from within through personal transformation and things like
How active were the deities in the everyday life of the Choctaw people? Like, did they interact with the people, or were they more standoffish from afar?
that. They interacted. It was more engaging and interactive, um, than anything else. The sun. I'm still getting accustomed to the language. When I'm reading it in my mind or to myself, I feel like I nail it, but um, to save my own dignity, I'm not going to try to even go there. But the sun deity, they believe that when the sun came up for the day, that he was emerging from his cave to survey the land. um, and so it was an interaction with the people, and the people interacted with the sun, and then the moon was the mother, the sun's wife, and the stars were her children. So, and then you have all like the mystery woman, or the unknown woman, so to speak, that was, as the Choctaw believed, was responsible for bringing them corn. You have the the deity that's responsible for bringing about like the ants, and all the insects, and like the vine in the water that gave the snakes and the bees and the hornets and the wasps, gave them their venom, that type of stuff. So it was a very interactive, um, deity hierarchy, if you will. So it very much played a part, in everyday life for the Choctaw, from basically from jump.
What were some common themes or practices that were found in like the Choctaw religion? Like, was there the concept of good and bad, or good versus evil?
The concept of good and bad did exist, yes. There was, they had a concept of the shadow people, or that your shadow followed you everywhere, while you walked the earth, and then when a person passed away, the shadow remained. So the aspect of what the world considers evil, um, it was there. It just didn't have the same connotation as it does, as it has over the last couple thousand years, so to speak.
What are some common um, religious practices? Like, were there annual things that were done every year in order to like worship the deities that
There
you
were there were things that they did, like, well, again, this all depends on, I guess, where a person would do their research. So in speaking with the elders who had the oral traditions of the Choctaw people, that still subscribe to those things, there were sacrifices, for worship, if you will, reverence. There were rituals that they would do with, like, around the full moon, things like that, that would honor the mother, or the wife of the sun. Again, I'm not going to try to butcher that name. They had their rituals to honor their deities. I honestly think, based on some of the discussions that I've had with elders, that the the ritual of sacrificing a person's horse when they passed away, that they quit doing sometime in, I want to say, the 1800s, if I remember correctly. That I honestly believe that also played into satisfying, the deities, so to speak. um, in all the literature that I've read online, books, things like that, it never really alluded to that. However, it's just one of those gut feelings based on, experience with speaking with other people, that it just lines up too much with, that kind of thing. So,
When discussing the concept of ethics, were there any characteristics or traits that stood out for the Choctaw people?
so if they got caught lying once, or they, again, like stealing as well, um, or if there was a murder, uh, they the Choctaw really subscribed to eye for an eye. When it came to lying and stealing, you got X amount of chances, and then it was pretty much a three strikes you're out type. So, if you were caught stealing a third time, then that's when capital punishment would come in. I think that their ethics kind of had a lot to do with the foundation of that belief system, to be honest with you.
What would you say the struggles were for the ancient Choctaw people?
They had to give up a lot of their lands, um, in return for, helping, which kind of led to the Trail of Tears. That as a progression. Um, they faced a lot of famine. They faced a lot of illness and sickness, even before the Trail of Tears. They lost a lot of what they felt, and rightfully so, was already theirs. Um, Language barrier obviously was definitely a challenge, an everyday challenge. They found a way to make it work, so to speak. But being one of the five civilized tribes, I guess, one thing I kind of hang my uh, love for baseball, is that the Choctaw are responsible for basically creating baseball. They had stickball, and that's where the
Mhm.
concept of baseball came from. And they used to use it as a means to solve conflict as opposed to war. They it was very it was a violent game. It wasn't necessarily like what you would see now, but it wasn't, nearly as violent as killing and war and things like that. So,
Well, thank you for taking the time to sit down and do this interview. I really appreciate it.
absolutely, I appreciate you asking me to do it.